I really struggled with trying to figure out a good name for this devotional. I looked at a couple ideas, and you know, it was interesting as some of them I had already used that one-word title for the devotionals. And if you've been following these devotionals for any length of time, you know that that's what I try to do. I find that one word that will describe what this devotional is about. And so I tried a couple, and I just nothing was coming to me. And then finally, I just titled it And that's because as I was reading this particular passage of Scripture, that's what I began to feel and think. Now, those of you who know me well, you know that since that pandemic, I've kind of been obsessed with the prophet Jeremiah. I mean, I've looked at the book of Jeremiah, I've studied Jeremiah, and you know, for me, Jeremiah's prophecy and situation just in so many ways I felt defines our experience during pandemic and coming out of pandemic. And so I've really been drawn to Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a reluctant prophet. He was a prophet who was called to speak some very difficult words, which most of the prophets are, but he was called to speak these words in a period of time for Israel when they were really going down. And he was supposed to speak to them around the time that the exile was going to happen, and he was supposed to encourage them during the exile to really get on with their life, even in the midst of a time when things aren't going well. But Jeremiah was also a very, I'll say, honest prophet who was not afraid to speak his mind, not only to the people, but also to God. And so I had been reading this other devotional, and it was talking about this experience in our lives when we see what's going on in the world around us, and we see the people around us who are not doing what we believe God is calling us to do, and we see them prospering when everything else seems to be falling apart. And this idea of God, when are you going to bring justice? When are you going to begin to punish the enemies that are clearly your enemies? When is that going to happen? And that's what was going on for Jeremiah, because he saw what was going on with Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, and how God was using this honestly a bad king to harm the people that Jeremiah knew God loved. And so he has this moment where he's just kind of like, God, when are you going to act? When are you going to fix this situation? When are you going to bring justice? And as I was looking at this and thinking about Jeremiah's struggle, I read it in a couple different translations, and I was really drawn to the way Eugene Peterson translates and puts in his own vernacular this particular chapter that comes to us in the book of Jeremiah. It's Jeremiah chapter 12, beginning at verse 4. And this is beginning at verse 1. And this is this honest conversation that Jeremiah has with God. And Eugene Peterson puts it like this. He says, in the words of Jeremiah, "You are right, O God, and you set things right. I can't argue with that. But I do have some questions. Why do bad people have it so good? Why can con artists make it big? You planted them and they put down roots. They flourished and produced fruit. They talk as if they're old friends with you, but they can't care less about you. Meanwhile, you know me inside and out. You don't let me get away with a thing. Make them pay for the way they live. Pay with their lives like sheep marked for the slaughter. How long do we have to put up with this? The country depressed, the farms in ruin, and all because of wickedness. These wicked lives, even animals and birds are dying off because they'll have nothing to do with God and think God has nothing to do with them." I got to tell you, that is about as honest as you're going to get from anyone trying to have a prayerful conversation with God. I do have some questions for you. I mean, have you ever felt that way in your own life as you're facing things that are going through life? I do have some questions for you, oh God. Why do bad people seem to prosper? Why do con artists make it big? What great questions he asks. And those can be our questions just as much as they can be Jeremiah's. What's interesting is, in verse 5, God answers Jeremiah. And he doesn't answer him the way maybe we would hope God would answer him or maybe expect God to answer him, but he answers him with a way of pointing Jeremiah towards something that perhaps he hasn't thought about. So after Jeremiah says all these things and lifts up all his questions, Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 5 says this: "So Jeremiah," says God, "if you're worn out in this foot race with men, what makes you think you can race against horses? And if you can't keep up your wits during times of calm, what's going to happen when troubles break loose like the Jordan in a flood?" That one line right at the beginning is the one that caught my attention. If you're worn out with a foot race with men, what makes you think you can race with horses? In fact, Eugene Peterson has written a book that looks at Jeremiah's prophecy, and he's named it Running with Horses. And the point is this: God often conditions us so that we might be able to become strong enough when things really become difficult, when the turmoil really begins to go. And that's basically what God is trying to say to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, look, you've got a long way to go here. Yes, we started out with some difficult times, and yes, you're seeing Nebuchadnezzar just run havoc over the land, but it's going to get worse, Jeremiah. And if you can't face the ridicule that you're getting right now from your own people, what's going to happen when you got to face really difficult times? It's made me think that oftentimes, and this isn't something we like to do, God conditions us in times where it might be difficult but not impossible for when things become impossible. I'm sure that Jeremiah hears this response from God and wants to say, well, yeah, but, or, God, I'm just not really sure I'm buying it yet. But if you look at the whole span of Jeremiah's life, you recognize that that's exactly what happened for Jeremiah. He got to where he could run with horses. Maybe he wasn't conditioned in the way he wanted to be, but he got to the place that God needed him to be. And if you're going through one of those times right now, ask God all the questions you need to ask God. But be ready for his answer, because his answer might be, you've got to make it through this if you're going to make it through that.